Picture this. A 13-year-old girl walks through the arrivals hall of Madrid airport with a small bag slung over her shoulder. Her family stays close beside her as she takes in a world she's only ever imagined. She's never left the Philippines before. She's never trained at a world-class tennis facility. She learned the game on a cracked court with faded lines, wearing light-up sneakers that had absolutely no business being on a tennis court. And despite all her dreams, she's terrified. Not because she doubts her talent, but because she's about to step into a world she's only seen on television. For the first time, the distance between her dream and reality feels enormous. She's in a country where she doesn't speak the language, surrounded by strangers who have no idea who she is or where she came from. Then, about 30 meters ahead, she sees him. Even from a distance, there's no mistaking him. Rafael Nadal. 22 Grand Slam titles. The greatest clay court player the sport has ever known. The man whose matches she watched over and over again. The man whose poster hung on her bedroom wall back home in Cebu. The player she talked about so often that her family practically knew his entire career by heart. In that instant, every ounce of composure disappeared. She didn't stop to think. She ran. Her entire family sprinted through Madrid airport, chasing one of the most famous athletes on earth, hoping for nothing more than a photograph. It was spontaneous. It was chaotic. It was wonderfully human. And somehow, that unforgettable moment became the first chapter of one of tennis' most heartwarming stories. Because years later, that same little girl from Cebu wouldn't be the one chasing Rafael Nadal anymore. She would step off a plane in Mallorca, and Nadal himself would be there waiting to welcome her. The girl who once ran after her hero became the player her hero came to receive. If that isn't the beginning of an incredible story, nothing is. But to understand just how extraordinary this journey really is, you have to understand where Alexandra Eala came from. The Philippines has never been known as a tennis powerhouse. There are no Grand Slam champions in the country's history. No famous tennis academies. No massive development system producing future stars year after year. For most young Filipino players, reaching the top of professional tennis isn't just difficult. It almost feels impossible. Yet somehow, in the middle of all those limitations, a young girl from Cebu City fell hopelessly in love with the sport. She played wherever she could, on worn-out courts, with limited resources. She watched professional matches whenever she had access to a screen, studying every point, every movement, every celebration. While other kids saw tennis as entertainment, she saw it as her future. Most people allow their circumstances to define the size of their dreams. Eala did the exact opposite. She refused to believe that where she started should determine where she could finish. That kind of belief is incredibly rare. Believing in yourself when the evidence around you says otherwise. That's what separates extraordinary athletes from everyone else. And Alex possessed that mindset long before the world knew her name. Then came the opportunity that could change everything. A one-week trial at the Rafael Nadal Academy in Manacor, Mallorca. No guarantees. No promises. Just 7 days to prove she belonged among some of the world's most talented young tennis players. For her family, the decision was easy. They packed their bags, left everything familiar behind, and flew halfway across the world for a single chance. Imagine being 13 years old, landing in a foreign country, knowing your future could be decided in just 1 week. For most kids, that kind of pressure would be overwhelming. Then, before the trial had even begun, fate gave them an unforgettable surprise. Walking through Madrid airport, they suddenly spotted Rafael Nadal himself. For a moment, all the nerves disappeared. Alex later laughed while telling the story. She said they simply happened to cross paths with him in the terminal, before anyone could even think. The entire family took off running after him. She called it fangirling. And, honestly, there isn't a better word for it, because that's exactly what happened. A family of passionate tennis fans completely forgot to act cool the second they came face-to-face with their greatest hero. At that moment, they were just fans chasing a dream none of them could have imagined. That one day, The legend they chased through an airport would proudly welcome Eala into his own academy and become part of one of the most inspiring journeys in modern tennis. Picture this. They actually caught up with him. Breathless from running through the terminal, Alex and her family told Rafael Nadal they were on their way to his academy for her one-week trial. Nadal responded exactly the way so many people who have met him describe him. Warm, approachable, genuinely kind. He stopped. He smiled. He happily posed for a photo. And just like that, Alex's very first memory of Spain wasn't the academy. It wasn't the tennis courts. It wasn't even Mallorca. It was a photograph with her childhood hero, taken in the middle of Madrid airport because her family had chased him through the terminal. Years later, Alex would laugh about it and simply call it a pretty good way to start. That might be the understatement of the decade, because the one-week trial never stayed a one-week trial. In 2018, Eala became one of the Rafa Nadal Academy's very first international students. And from that moment on, her life changed forever. The academy sits in Manacor, a quiet town in the heart of Mallorca. It's impressive, but not because it's extravagant. Its greatest strength is its philosophy. The philosophy that made Rafael Nadal one of the greatest competitors in sports history. Talent is never enough. Hard work is everything. Every practice is an opportunity to improve or to fall behind. And your mindset is just as important as your forehand. Alex embraced every lesson, every training session, every challenge. She practiced alongside elite juniors from Europe and South America, players who had grown up with world-class facilities, experienced coaches, and national development programs behind them. On paper, many of them seemed miles ahead. But Alex never backed down. She belonged, day by day, shot by shot. She improved. The same coaches who had helped shape Rafael Nadal's game were now investing their knowledge in a determined teenager from Cebu who had once learned tennis on a cracked court wearing rubber-soled shoes. The transformation didn't happen overnight. Real growth never does. But it was impossible to ignore. Everyone at the academy could see it, including Rafa himself. That's something many people misunderstand about famous sports academies. They assume the superstar behind the name is simply a brand, a face on the logo, someone who rarely shows up. Rafael Nadal was different. He was there, watching practice, talking with players, asking questions, offering advice. He wasn't just lending his name to the academy. He was helping shape its culture. For Alex, though, that created one hilarious problem. How do you act normal around the person you've admired your entire life? The answer? You don't. Alex has admitted this herself, and it's one of the most relatable parts of her story. Even after years at the academy, even after speaking with Nadal multiple times, she still got completely tongue-tied whenever he was around. She said she never really knew what to say, and the nerves never disappeared. In her own words, it doesn't get better. If anything, it never got easier. Think about that for a second. This is the same player who would later defeat Grand Slam champions, beat top 10 opponents, and compete fearlessly on the biggest stages in tennis. Yet a simple conversation with Rafael Nadal could still make her brain completely freeze. That's the power of a childhood hero. To Alex, Rafa wasn't just a coach. He wasn't only a mentor. He represented the dream that had inspired her ever since she first picked up a tennis racket in Cebu. When someone shapes your dreams for that long, seeing them in person never truly feels ordinary, no matter how many times it happens. Alex remained at the Rafa Nadal Academy until graduating in 2023. By then, she had become one of its greatest success stories. The foundation built in Mallorca followed her everywhere. Her relentless defense, her mental toughness, her discipline, her refusal to give up under pressure. Every part of her game carried the fingerprints of those years in Manacor. But graduation wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Then came 2024. And suddenly, the entire tennis world knew her name. At the Miami Open, Alex produced one of the tournament's biggest surprises. She defeated Iga Swiatek, then Madison Keys, then Yelena Ostapenko. one after another. 3 elite players. 3 stunning victories. She wasn't just winning. She was dominating with a confidence that made it look as though she had always belonged on that stage. The world couldn't believe what it was watching. Her phone exploded. Messages poured in from every direction. Friends, fans, fellow players, people she'd never even met. Everyone wanted to congratulate her. But Alex had another match to play. She did what every focused athlete should do. She ignored the phone. She stayed locked in. Winning mattered more than notifications. Then came the part of the story that is almost too perfect to make up. Hidden among the hundreds of unread messages was one from Rafael Nadal himself. The legend had personally reached out after watching her incredible run in Miami. A message from her childhood idol, the man whose poster once hung on her bedroom wall, the man her family had chased through Madrid airport years earlier. And because Alex was completely focused on competing, she never saw it. For 4 straight days, without realizing it, Eala accidentally left Rafael Nadal undelivered. Sometimes, life has a sense of humor. The little girl who once sprinted through an airport hoping for a single photo had become so focused on chasing greatness that she unintentionally kept one of the greatest players in tennis history waiting for a reply. For 4 entire days, Rafael Nadal waited for a reply, and nothing came. No response, no acknowledgement, just silence. Not because Eala ignored him, but because she had no idea his message was even there. She was still deep in tournament mode, completely focused on competing while hundreds of congratulatory messages piled up on her phone. Only after the tournament ended did she finally begin scrolling through the avalanche of notifications. And then, she saw it. A personal message from Rafael Nadal, her childhood hero, the man whose poster once hung on her bedroom wall, the coach whose academy had changed her life, the legend she had accidentally left unanswered for 4 days. When Alex later told the story, she summed up her reaction in the most relatable way possible. "I almost died. Honestly. Who wouldn't?" Realizing you've accidentally left Rafael Nadal waiting for a reply is the kind of nightmare no tennis fan wants to experience. She immediately apologized, explaining that she'd been completely locked in on the tournament and hadn't checked her messages. Nadal's response? Exactly what you'd expect from someone whose reputation extends far beyond tennis. He laughed it off. He was incredibly gracious. He didn't take offense for even a second. As Alex later put it, he was super nice about it. That simple exchange said something important. It wasn't just a funny story. It showed that Nadal was still paying attention. He wasn't congratulating a former student out of obligation. He had watched her matches. He had seen her defeat some of the biggest names in women's tennis. He recognized how far she'd come. The nervous 13-year-old who had arrived for a 1-week trial had become a player worthy of the world's attention. And Nadal wanted her to know he was proud. Then came another moment that no one could have predicted. About a year after playing the final match of his legendary career, Rafael Nadal stepped back onto a tennis court. Not for a comeback, not for an exhibition, not for another title, just to train. And the player he chose to share that court with was Eala. The images spread across the tennis world almost instantly. There stood Rafael Nadal. 22 Grand Slam titles. One of the greatest athletes the sport has ever seen. Back on court for the first time since retirement. Across the net stood the same Filipina teenager who had once chased him through an airport with nothing more than hope and admiration. It almost felt like a movie. 7 years earlier, she had been asking him for a photograph. Now, she was trading forehands with him. For Alex, the experience was almost impossible to describe. She said it was the kind of opportunity every young tennis player dreams about. Sharing the court with him wasn't just exciting. It was unforgettable. Then she casually mentioned something that made tennis fans everywhere smile. During the session, Rafael Nadal gave her advice on her forehand. Just imagine that. The very forehand she'd spent years watching on television. The shot she had tried to imitate countless times on cracked courts back in Cebu. Now the man who created it was standing beside her, helping her improve her own. The Rafael Nadal Academy later described it as a truly unique day. If anything, that was another understatement. Because there is nothing ordinary about a retired legend choosing to spend his time mentoring one of his former students. For Alex, that practice session meant far more than hitting tennis balls. It was validation. Proof that she had grown beyond being a promising junior. She had become someone Rafael Nadal genuinely believed in. Someone worth investing his time in. The little girl who once wore light-up shoes on broken courts had become an athlete her hero wanted to train with. Then came the moment that completed the story, the moment that left tennis fans speechless. When Alex returned to Mallorca, Rafael Nadal was waiting for her at the airport. Not through a text message, not with a social media post. In person, waiting to welcome her back. Pause for a second and think about what that means. The first time Alex saw Nadal, she was the one running after him. A nervous teenager from the Philippines trying to catch her idol before he disappeared into the crowd. Years later, everything had changed. This time, Nadal was the one waiting. She was the one arriving. The fan had become the player. The student had become someone the mentor proudly welcomed home. That's the true full-circle moment. Not because it's emotional, but because it was earned. It would be easy to call this a fairy tale. But fairy tales don't require thousands of hours of practice. Fairy tales don't involve endless sacrifices, lonely training sessions, injuries, pressure, or representing an entire nation that had never produced a tennis player at this level before. This story was built on work. Every early morning, every exhausting workout, every difficult match, every moment Alex refused to believe that where she started would decide where she could finish. That's why Nadal waiting at the airport mattered so much. It wasn't a publicity stunt. It wasn't staged for cameras. It was genuine respect. One champion recognizing another athlete who had earned her place. Today, Eala walks into Wimbledon as the tournament's number 29 seed. Take a moment to appreciate what that means. For the first time in history, a Filipino player enters Wimbledon as a seeded competitor. No Filipino had ever achieved that before. Eala changed history, and she carries with her everything Mallorca gave her. The discipline, the resilience, the confidence, the mindset, and the lessons of the man who helped shape her journey. Somewhere across the Philippines, children are watching.